I couldn't decide if I wanted to press on in Romans because we're entering uh the Roman 6 stuff by Rogers, which I just love. Or if I wanted to press on in Matthew. I chose Matthew because I've picked Romans the last couple videos, and I've really been loving, like, I'm not over Taylor Wolfman's study on Matthew. I just think it's just cohesive, nice little slab of truth, and I enjoy that. Um, so yeah, I'm just gonna press on here. This is Gerudo King. I'm doing the Gospel of Matthew. This is part 4 of the Vladimir Gelesnoff series, volume 2, issue number 19. This article is called The Three Cycles. Matthew divides the history of Israel from Abraham to the Messiah into 3 main periods. It's just extraordinarily helpful if you're looking to do a deeper dive into the Old Testament. So all the generations from Abraham unto David are 14 generations. And from David unto the carrying away to Babylon are 14 generations. And from the carrying away to Babylon unto the Christ are 14 generations. This is Matthew 1:17. A cursory review of these periods in light of the historical books discloses certain distinctive features which have an important bearing on Messiah's relation and mission to the Hebrew people. Perhaps the thing to arrest detention, I'm sorry, I don't know why I said detention, it's attention, is the difference in God's methods with Israel. The Lord dealt with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob without an intermediary. He communed with them directly in dreams and other ways not specified in the records. He appeared to them and disclosed numerous matters hitherto kept secret. But within the lifetime of Jacob, when Israel's history merged from the individual to the family stage, there appears a notable departure. Jehovah neither leads nor speaks directly to Jacob's sons. He sent a man before them, Psalm 105:17. He unbosoms himself about them to Joseph, and Joseph transmits God's revelations to his brethren and prepares the way before them. Thenceforward, he deals with Israel exclusively through a mediator. The 3 cycles exhibit various modes of God's mediatorial dealings with the Israelites, all of which fail through the innate frailty of the mediators themselves, no less than through the lack of fealty on the part of the nation. From Abraham to David, patriarchal rule obtains. Government is theocratic. Leaders are called and equipped by God. First Joseph, then Moses and Joshua. After them, the 14 judges hold office in turn, not in virtue of birthright, but by divine appointment. The cycle ends in social upheaval. The country is torn by tribal feuds, an internecine war? Internecine, what the hell? Brother, what are you saying? Destructive to both sides in a conflict. Okay, so the country is torn by tribal feuds and civil war, I guess you could say, or destructive to both sides war. From David to the Babylonish captivity, monarchic rule is in force. In accordance with God's pleasure embodied in a covenant, the throne of Israel becomes hereditary in the royal line of David. The kings, like their predecessors in office, frequently incur Jehovah's displeasure, and by their wanton acts precipitate a national disaster. The Judean kingdom forfeits its independence and is reduced to a mere appendage of the world mistress, Babylon. With the return from exile dates the establishment of priestly rule, which continued during the earth life of our Lord and the subsequent ministry of the apostles in the Acts. The book of Malachi shows how soon and sadly their rule degenerated. The chief priests and scribes were Messiah's chief opponents and the prime movers of his crucifixion. We have no king but Caesar in John 19:15 well expresses their political and religious feelings of the time. Moreover, beside a change of administration, the dawn of each cycle is heralded by a covenant in virtue of which stupendous benefits are unconditionally promised to the Hebrews. The Abrahamic covenant in Genesis 12, 1 through 3, pledging the political preeminence of the nation and land of Israel, heads the first cycle. The Davidic covenant in 2 Samuel 7, verses 8 through 17, which guarantees the perpetuity of the Davidic house and throne, marks the opening of the second. While the new covenant in Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34, with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, assuring the national pardon and regeneration, inaugurates the third. All these covenants converge in the Messiah and find their fulfillment in him. As heir of the Abrahamic promise, he delivers Israel out of the hands of their enemies. Luke 1, verses 73 and 74. As David's son and heir, he ascends Israel's throne and restores the monarchy of his royal ancestor. Luke 1, 32 and 33. As mediator of the new covenant, he saves his people, that is, Israel, from their sins. Matthew 1, 21. The materialization of these covenant promises was in the warp and woof of the proclamation made by the Baptist and taken up by the Lord himself after John's imprisonment. Yet another matter of deepest interest and significance is that the three appearances of Satan in the Old Testament are closely associated with Matthew's three cycles. The book of Job affords a glimpse of Satan's activity in patriarchal days. He hurls his fiery darts against Job, who, stripped of property, bereft of children, defamed by friends, curses his day, and impugns the dispensation of divine providence, which has disturbed his even round of daily life. In the days of David, Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to oppose God in the matter of the census. The king is incited to employ the very authority delegated by God to cross his wish and thwart his plan. This is 1 Chronicles 21, verse 1. Once more, in post-exilic days, Satan stands up before the Lord to resist the high priest Joshua and to accuse him before the angel of Jehovah. Zechariah 3, verses 1 and 2. Two forces of opposite natures are thus seen in operation in the course of each period. God, working on the basis of a covenant, directs the activities of his people towards certain definite ends and the realization of certain definite plans. Satan, on the other hand, by means of varied guileful seductions, contrives to deflect those activities to other channels and prevent, for the time being, the realization of those plans. He weakens the patriarch's trust and leads him to doubt God's wisdom. He incites the king to insubordination and moves him to defy his power. He assails the purity of the priest and leads him to despise his love. Each cycle begins with the enactment of a covenant and ends with apostasy therefrom. Its opening witnesses a display of Jehovah's goodness. Its close demonstrates to the world that they were not only rebellious sinners, but also were set upon their own evil ways, even when God had, in a special manner, revealed himself to them. At the inception of each period, God revives his work among the people. At the close, the nation is crushed beneath the feet of heathen foes. The Philistines, the Babylonians, the Romans appear in possession of Israel's land at the conclusion of each respective cycle. At the time of David's first public appearance, Israel was in the hand of spoilers. Aliens held the land. The imprecations of the uncircumcised giant spread terror among the people. Consternation reigned in the camp. David, the anointed of the God of Jacob, went forth, slew Goliath, who had terrorized the people, beat back the enemy, and removed the reproach from Israel. Similar conditions existed at the time David's greater son was entering the public ministry. The Romans held the land. Satan dominated them by the fear of death. So Messiah came forth to bring to naught him that had the power of death, that is, the devil, and might deliver all of them, the seed of Abraham, who through the fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Hebrews 2:14-16. And here let's get into the first division. We now proceed to examine more particularly the first main division of the book, which extends from chapter 1 to chapter 4, verse 16. And I want to pull out my little book. If you pull out your concordance, the paper one, and or if you have the PDF, that helps too. But if you flip to the very, very back, you will find that there are structures provided for each of the sections here. Looking at it, seems like the way that Knox splits it, he ends it at verse 11. That would be the end of that one. So I don't know. Check, what does 16 explicitly say? Chapter 6, 16. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could split it here. So Knox starts splitting it earlier, slightly earlier, right here. Which I don't know. I kind of agree with Vladimir on this, where 16 would make sense to be the last verse, because that's thenceforth begins Jesus. I mean, the begin right there. Okay, and it's just the same here. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Gelesnoff here. The bulk of it is taken up with matters relating to the king. They are arranged into separate sections, each developing 3 items, the intervening part being concerned with the ministry of the forerunner. The analysis is as follows. And this is something that Gelesnoff is really good at. So here we concern the king in 3 successive, what does he call it? Just matters. Yeah, 3 items, I guess. Genealogy, the birth, and then the Messiah and his people. He sojourns. There's an interval here. Baptism, temptation. Yeah, and then Messiah and his people. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So, and then there's a sojourn at Capernaum. The first section has for its subject Messiah's mission to Israel. The obvious intent of the genealogy is to prove the Abrahamic descent of Jesus Christ and establish his title to the throne of Israel by asserting him to be a direct lineal descendant of King David, heir and fulfiller of the promises made to the fathers, per Romans 15:8. In the following paragraph, recounting the manner of his becoming flesh and the angelic announcement that he will save Israel from their sins, glows in the light of the Hebrew letter. There we learn that Christ came to take hold of the seed of Abraham, Hebrews 2:16. To accomplish this, however, it was imperative that he should be made in all things like unto his brethren. As these are sharers in flesh and blood, he also, in like manner, partook of the same, to make propitiation for the sins of the people, and bring many sons into glory. Verses 1-23 of chapter 2 exhibit the mutual relations between the Messiah and his people in a series of quotations from the ancient scriptures, woven into the narrative of events connected with the birth at Bethlehem, the flight to Egypt, and sojourn at Nazareth. His shepherdly and kingly functions towards the nation from which he sprang, his divine call out of Egypt, the persecution inflicted on the Jews by earthly potentates because of messianic expectations, the contempt heaped upon the king by his own kinsmen, and his sufferings at their hands, all these are vividly brought for us. The second section, in chapter 3, verse 13 to chapter 4, verse 16, contemplates Messiah's identification with his nation. The object of his baptism in chapter 3, verses 13 through 17, was to unite himself with the true remnant of the nation. The expression, my son, in the 15th verse of chapter 2, is used of Israel in God's message to Pharaoh. Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And I have said unto you, let my son go, that he may serve me. Exodus 4, 22 and 23. The import of Hosea's words, out of Egypt have I called my son, which undoubtedly refer to the bringing out of Egypt, is now transferred from the sinful nation to the sinless Redeemer. A parallel is thus drawn between the impending deliverance and the Exodus. Wow, I've never seen that before. So silly. Yeah, that's so interesting. I've never thought of that. Oh, wow, and it's a baptism too. That's crazy. The Red Sea crossing, that's a baptism into like an abidement with Yahweh. That's crazy. And we know from our evangel that's a unification. That's just so beautiful. Yeah, the fathers had been baptized in the cloud and the sea, 1 Corinthians 10:2. This united them to the man sent to be their deliverer. So now John's baptism linked the Israelites receiving it to the coming one. And as of yore, the cloudy pillar appeared. So now the cloud hovers over the baptismal scene. The meaning of the temptation in chapter 4, verses 1 through 11 becomes intelligible in the light of Hebrews 2:18. For wherein he himself has suffered, being tempted, he is able to succor them that are tempted. We have already seen in Matthew's cycles 3 phases of national probation. The 3 temptations of the Christ are closely related thereto. He treads every inch of the road the nation had trodden. He is tested in every point in which they have been tested, with widely different results, however. Their trials evinced departure from the word and resulted in defeat. His trials evince reliance on the word and result in victory. During the first period of probation, famine was a prominent pupil. The fathers, and later on the nation, were tested by its means. He suffered you to hunger, Deuteronomy 8:3. The effect was that both turned towards Egypt with disastrous consequences to themselves. Fascinating. The king undergoes a like ordeal, but unlike his forefathers and his people, whom he is now grafted into, he persists in faith and repudiates self-help. Fascinating. The second period of probation is as clearly associated with the temple as the first is with famine. The sanctuary was the touchstone of Judah's kings. In time of distress, they looked to man for help. They looted the temple treasury to hire foreign aid. This is precisely the point of the second attack. Satan urges our Lord to emulate the example of his royal ancestors. Emphasizing the helplessness of his situation and assuring him of angelic protection, the tempter pushes him on toward a feat which bids fair to accredit his messiahship to the multitudes and win their allegiance. Christ declined to take the initiative in effecting deliverance. He trusts his Father. He patiently awaits his time. Subsequent developments vindicated his faith and proved that God's help never fails those who trust him. Satan himself was the delivering agent, for as soon as our Lord refused his proposal, he carried him off to another place. Wow. During the third period, Israel's faith was tested along the line of hope in the promise of the kingdom. With the return from exile, the crown was not restored to Judah's princes. The high priest had no Urim and Thummim, Ezekiel 2, verses 61 through 63, and Nehemiah chapter 7, verses 63 and 65. Royalty and priesthood are pointed alike to the coming of the branch, who combines both offices in his person. As formerly, Israel's faith broke under the strain. Centuries of weary waiting dimmed the hope. They began to question the rich promises and glowing visions of their seers. To reconcile the glorious prophecies of their future with their actual condition as a conquered race, they resorted to spiritualization and dreamed of a fulfillment other than that conveyed by the ordinary meaning of words. They looked to their conquerors, thinking that in some way the promise of a kingdom would be realized through them. Some cast longing eyes toward Rome. Others, like the Herodians, looked for deliverance to appear in the family of Herod. The king, too, is tried on this score. Satan offers him the kingdoms of the world in return for a single act of worship. It's so funny because I did read this section today here, the chapter 4, verse 1 through 11, and I see the kingdoms of the world. It's not the kingdom that is promised, of course. And I can't help but think that if this were to be followed through, wouldn't he be just receiving the kingdoms of the world as they are, not perfected by his Father? Because honestly, there's no real way around that. You would just get a half-baked earth in disarray. Plus, on top of all of that, you would no longer be subject to your father. You would be subject to Adam's failures, their truly be a part of his lineage, literally, instead of in likeness, in simile. So yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. But he scorned the idea of receiving the kingdoms from any hand other than that of his God and Father. It is patent that an intimate connection exists between the trials of Israel and the temptations of Christ. God promised Israel a land with abundance of bread, a temple, a kingdom. Wow. She enjoyed these for a season, but lost them through sin. Transgression hardened the soil and withheld prosperity. The land was forfeited. The scepter passed away. All these Messiah will restore. He overcame where they succumbed. His victory secures Jehovah's promises for them. He will reinstate them in the good land. He will bring back Jehovah's presence, which will find a suitable abode in the millennial temple. He will rehabilitate the fallen tent of David. This interrelation between the temptations of the Messiah and those of Israel forms a link between the Gospels and the Hebrew letter, which founds its appeals upon this great fact. I just love this theme stays throughout Matthew, continually and perpetually, according as it is written, according as it is written, according as it is written, just all the time. I mean, don't get me wrong, Paul has to do the same thing with his evangel in Romans and be like, nope, this was promised before. Even Romans 1:2, he starts by saying, look, this was promised. But here he actually ties it into the promises. And as Gelesnoff pointed out before, the actual covenants that were promised to Israel. So seeing this tiny little connection, I'm thinking even every name that is given throughout the first 16 verses of Matthew is itself a direct tie-in to everything that came in before in the Old Testament. And that would be a fun way to just, like, you could, any good writer would just start with that and just be like, okay, now let's tell this story. But no, God keeps hammering this point and keeps throwing this point out there again and again. Why? Because no one gets that the first time through Matthew 1. No one's getting that. No, this is a continual thing that you have to keep pointing out over and over again. And Israel still doesn't get it to this very day. They still don't like that this is the complement of the Hebrew scriptures. The four accounts are complements of the Hebrew Scriptures. The Hebrew Scriptures are a mystery and incomplete without the four accounts. And then the entire circumcision writings are a mystery and incomplete without Paul's letters. It's just this perfect complementary style of writing. Again, the best word for it is just unfolding. It's just a continual revelation of the matter. It's just beautiful. The prevailing notion that Hebrews descants on the superiority of Christianity to Judaism is misleading. It is first gratuitously assumed, and then the text is distorted to accord with that assumption. Now, the epistle is manifestly addressed to Hebrews who had attended the ministry of the Son in the Gospels and that of the 12 in Acts. These two ministries are the starting points of the epistle, Hebrews 1:2 and 2:1-4, whose great aim is to demonstrate the superiority of the Abrahamic and Davidic and New Covenants, the very ones which initiate Matthew's 3 cycles to the Sinaitic. The church is never in view in this epistle. Wonder if they have something on Hebrews, these guys, these unsearchable riches guys. I know that Martin, he did a really good study on Hebrews in the radio shows, but I don't know. I mean, I know that like they talk about Hebrews, but they don't really consider like a study, you know. I don't know if that's a specific thing that they consider in the unsearchable riches. If not, it'd be a fun thing to write about. It just would, you have to have pretty dense knowledge of the Old Testament for that. And I'm not qualified. So the Pentecostal believers were zealous of the law. It's Acts 21:20. They clung thereto with fanatical tenacity. The writer seeks to wean them therefrom. He contrasts the evanescence of the system founded on the Sinai covenant with the unfailing promises of the other three, which await a performance guaranteed by God's oath. Moses, the mediator of the Sinai covenant, and Christ, the mediator of the new, are set in juxtaposition. Moses gave the shadow of the good things to come, and Christ has brought the substance, the good things themselves. Hebrews 10:1. Moses led Israel into a temporary possession of the land, and Christ has come to give them the heritage for a permanent possession. The nation as such was God's house over which Moses presided as a servant. Those to whom the letter is written constitute the house over which Christ presides as a son. Hebrews 3:5-6. A parallel is instituted between the present crisis and the temptation in the wilderness. Let us fear, therefore, lest haply a promise being left of entering into his rest, any one of you should seem to have come short of it. For indeed we have had good tidings preached unto us, even as also they. But the word of hearing did not profit them, because they were not one in faith with them that gave heed to it. Caleb and Joshua, Hebrews 4:2. Those that came out of Egypt under Moses stood on the margin of the land. They were about to enter into rest. When the glad tidings were brought, however, they wavered and failed to enter in because of unbelief. The scene is reenacted. There remains a Sabbath rest, sabbatismos, for the people of God. Good tidings respecting it have been published. It becomes those who have heard them to give heed and labor to enter into that rest, lest they fall after the same example of disobedience. Chapter 4, verse 11. With this situation in view, the writer makes a touching appeal. Having then a great high priest who hath passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. For we have not a high priest that cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but one that hath been in all points similarly tempted without sin. Let us therefore draw near with boldness unto the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and may find grace to help in time of need. This is Hebrews 4, verses 14 to 16. He has already shown that his temptation was to succor his tempted brethren linked to him by fleshy ties, per Hebrews 2:18. Now he tells them that they can count on his sympathy and help because he has been similarly tempted in all points. The posse peccare, which I don't know what that is. Let's have some fun. What does this mean? Able to sin is what that means. Able to sin. And then what about posse not peccare? Not able to sin. Is this phrases from of the schoolmen is an idle speculation, which ignores the special design of the letter and the true scope and intent of the passage. Yeah, I don't really know about this. We have shown that the epistle is addressed to the Hebrews who had been the subjects of the ministries recorded in the Gospels and the Acts. Hence, the pronouns employed throughout the book must be interpreted according to the dedicatory sentence. To refer the we, us, our, to others, etc., to others than those specified on the envelope is to misrepresent facts, misconstrue the teaching, and arrive at false conclusions. They had been enlightened, they had tested the good word of God in Hebrews 6, 4-6. But as the accomplishment of the promise was deferred, they chafed at the delay. Their hope wavered. They were in danger of relapsing. They needed patience to receive the promise in chapter 10, verse 36 of Hebrews. So the apostle brings before them the example of their king and priest. Satan offered to dispense with delay and deliver him the kingdom at once. He disdained the suggestion. He patiently waited God's time. He endured the cross, despising shame, and sat down at God's right hand as their mediator. Let them look unto Jesus, the inaugurator and perfecter of faith. Hebrews 12:2. They will obtain from him to help run with patience the race that is set before them. That's so funny. Like half of this, and this isn't just true to this article. Again, I just go back and forth on Vladimir's writing so often because, like, as much as I love this, like, all of this is such beneficial information going into Matthew. It's just that he never sticks to the topic. He's like, it's like Seth. That's kind of like why I love it a little bit, I guess. Like, it's so endearing to me because it's like, you know, this has been Hebrews. He already kind of broke down the Old Testament preparatory stuff in the second article. He also kind of went into the structural stuff in the first article. You know, it's like that feels like that's where you would want to deal with it. And he just doesn't do that. He just is now getting into like this place, that place, this place, that. But it at the same time, it makes sense. Like it does fit perfectly in tandem with Matthew. And I mean, it is a study. You're expected to read Matthew already. It's not like the Rogers study, you know, where you he goes line by line. You know, this is a little more broad, which I guess I don't mind. You know, how long do you expect them to spend on a 50-verse chapter? You know, it's much tougher to do a Rogers study on stuff like that. But nevertheless, it's like, you know, this feels like something. All of this really feels like something that is super packed and dense in its statements. It just could be a little longer, I wish, even. I guess brevity is the soul of wit, but try telling that to me because I don't know jack. Okay. The section ends with a presentation of the Messiah as Israel's light. It's just chapter 4, verses 12-16. The point of the quotation from Isaiah in verses 15 and 16 must be gathered from the prophecy of which it is a part. Isaiah in chapters 7-12 forms a separate section. Its one pervading subject is the perpetuity of the Davidic house and throne. It opens with the allied forces of Israel and Syria invading Judah with the avowed intention of overthrowing the dynasty of David and place upon the throne of Judah a creature of their own. Chapter 7, verse 6, and 2 Kings 16, verse 5. Wow. It closes with a picture of the peaceful rule of the shoot of Jesse, firmly established on the throne of his forefathers, chapters 11 and 12. The historic background is furnished by the political situation in the reigns of Ahaz and Hezekiah. God will bring against the Ephraim the king of Assyria. This is chapter 8, verses 4 through 7. Judah will not altogether escape the scourge. When the Assyrian invades Samaria, he will sweep onward into Judah, and fill the breadth of Emmanuel's land. Chapter 8, verse 8. Now, chapter 9, verses 1 through 7, brings together the first Assyrian invasion under Pekah and the last under Hezekiah. It's just like it goes into Isaiah. This is what I'm talking about. I love it. It just jumps over. We're talking about Hebrews. All right, let's get back to Matthew. Never mind. Let's go over to Isaiah. I mean, and again, it fits. It is the quote in Isaiah. But anyways, the former brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. The latter resulted in glory for the land by the sea beyond Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The story is told in Kings and Chronicles. The first time the king of Assyria took all the land of Naphtali, 2 Kings 15:29. The last time when the destroying angel smote 65,000 men in the Assyrian camp, Sennacherib retreated by the way of the sea. The result was that Hezekiah became exalted in the sight of all nations, light sprang to the people, and Judah enjoyed 15 years of undisturbed peace and prosperity. As in the days of Hezekiah, Israel's hope dawns in Galilee of the nations. The ministry of John, chapter 3, verses 1 through 12 of Matthew, binds the two sections together around the glad tidings then heralded in Judah. The message of John embraced all that we find in Isaiah chapter 40, verses 1 through 11. The accomplishment of Jerusalem's time of service, that is, subjection to aliens, the pardon of her iniquity, the homecoming of her exiles, the declaration to the cities of Judah, behold your God. Jehovah coming as a mighty one to render recompense, to feed his flock as a shepherd, to reveal his glory, disperse his enemies like a chaff. At last, after centuries of bondage, the anointed of the Lord came to preach glad tidings and proclaim release to the captives. Luke 4, verses 18 and 19. Phenomenal stuff, as per usual, by Mr. Gelesnoff. That's going to be it for me here. Thank you, Tim. Yeah. And yeah, that's another point as well. Yeah, Satan owned the kingdoms until grace was enthroned at the cross. But nevertheless, yeah, this is true. And this is just as true. Trust God. So a couple things. I'm thinking I can't decide. I do want to continue on in the Roman series. I would also like to press on in this Matthew series. I like these little readings. They're very relaxing for me. I love to read. I love to also read what my brothers have written concerning these matters. And if there's anyone that we should be learning from right now, I do think that these brothers here offer very vital and valuable info. So on that note, I'm thinking I want to read the A. Enoch Studies in Genesis by starting in volume 42 of the Unsearchable Riches. I don't know how many volumes it goes for. I would like to do that, but I would probably like to finish the Roman studies first before I do that. So it's still on my list. I just keep on it keeps bubbling up inside of me because all this discussion about Matthew. I'd love to even be able to return to this series and I've learned even more, that sort of thing. But yeah, maybe when I'm done the Roman study by Rogers and the complementary stuff by Dean Huff to have a complete, Roman study here, maybe I'll do that in the near future. That's mainly on my list right now in terms of online stuff. I am still working on the Greek curriculum for you guys. It is still on my list. I do plan on completing that in the near future. So look forward to that. That'll be fun. Um, I I say near future. It's probably going to take the summer. I'm not going to lie to get through that sort of thing. Because it's not just like making sure that I've got all the details right. It's also legitimately trying to put together the curriculum for it. And I do want this curriculum to be as comprehensive as possible. Like it'll start beginner, but it'll be a longer study to move into the all of the details. So yeah, I want to work on that for sure. But I'm moving so slowly right now that I'm like trying to write everything out so that way I know what I'm actually going to put into a presentation. I'm probably going to have to ask someone to help verify all of the information and like the citations and stuff. And I'll cross that line when I get there. But yeah, that is my general agenda for the year here, to help equip the student of the New Testament as much stuff as possible. You can also just do it yourself right now with the book, The Greek Elements by Knock and Co. They're the only ones that seem to actually break things down to their literal elements and their families. So that'd be really fun. Um, but yeah, I mean, those are the main ones right now. So definitely look forward to all of that. Hopefully in the near future. I think that's everything. I mean, I'm still doing also like a bunch of writing and stuff too. I've done a lot of writing in my posts the past few weeks, a lot more because I've been like more so wanting to highlight the writing that I'm doing. And I know I have more of a crowd here than on the blog front. So if I can find like direct any way point to the blog, I would rather people look at the writings. I know that's where I excel, not really with these video type things. Video type stuff, I'm far better with just reading because I am not a practiced public speaker. I know I got a lot of thanks for the conference, and I'm grateful for that. But at the same time, just on a factual level, I'm far better on the writing side. So I will always direct. I think I express my thoughts best there. I still take correction if anyone has actual verses, evidence to help perfect those articles to be the best they can be. I appreciate that. So looking forward to it. And thank you, Deborah. Much obliged. um, I absolutely love reading these. And I don't know. I know that it's like what Paul says that opportunely herald the word. So I know these guys are heralding the word. And I know they're qualified workers. So I would rather just, not talk as much as possible and just read what they've written on a lot of subjects because I'm very grateful to learn from people like them. But I would also feel weird, if I just kept it to myself and didn't share it with anyone. And on top of that, I also like reading it out like this. It just helps the info really sink in. And so I can really sit down, read it. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it, And Deborah, I know you're liking the Roman series, which is one of the, like, you guys have no idea how much um, the confidence boosters are, like I really appreciate you guys pointing out what it is that you do like or what it is that you don't like. There was a girl at the conference, her name is Connie, who actually asked me to talk about Genesis a little bit. So that's part of the reason I'm also looking to get into the Genesis study too. I haven't forgotten that, and I push on it. I also have to thank Dak for getting us the camera um, for the potential ecclesias that we'll start recording every week, probably on Tuesdays. I haven't gotten it working on my computer. I don't know what's wrong on that front. Hopefully it'll either work on Rodney's computer, or I might just have to get some kind of plug-in for my computer that will enable it to see this camera. That'd be helpful. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stuff here to work on. Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot. So hopefully y'all are getting enjoyment out of it, like as Deborah is. Yeah, I read Genesis before. This will be a study by Knock. I got the book a while back, and I read some of it, and I just thought, man, this would be such a good one to share because it actually deals with a lot of the questions and complications in especially in terms of the scientific side of things, like the evolution. He really pushes against those theories by pointing out that the scriptural evidence stands true. And while I'm understanding of theories like evolution, I can understand completely why someone would want to find any alternative than an alleged God that would burn people alive eternally. I do appreciate Knox's endeavors to highlight, no, this is what God said concerning creation in Genesis 1. And also just throughout all of this series, he really gets into this. And to capitalize on that, Rasmo, I am working on putting together Genesis again, but I noticed I had a lot of audio skips and stuff, and I realized doing it live isn't really the best route. So I'm going to do it in such a way that I want to do some fun voices. I don't get to do voices. I suck at doing voices, but it'd be fun to do some voices. Inject some life into the reading. If it's going to be my reading, if I'm stuck doing that, I want to do that. But I'll release that reading as I go through the studies in Genesis, and then I'll upload that. I'm also going chapter by chapter, so I have a little bit more time to myself to let things sink in. I'm also just taking some more notes too. That you have the giant concordant Old Testament book. I always think to myself, oh yeah, I'll read it, but then I don't, and because I'll get caught up back in Romans or something. So, yeah, Romans is a tough one. It is an enigma. There are some passages. Aaron Welsh actually put out a really interesting article that I was thinking about. I've been thinking about for a while, and it's propelled me also to look more into Acts, which was it's hard for me to verbalize what he said. It'd probably be easier if you just read it yourselves, but he points out that the ministry that, or I guess the Acts 28 theory that I guess Clyde and co are peddling just does not make any legitimate sense in regards to the verbiage used in Romans 11. And I totally agree with that. But I also understand that at Acts 28, that is when the kingdom administration fully reaches its close. And I have always taken the stance that the only thing that happens in Acts 28 is the kingdom administration ends. That is it. There's no indicator there whether Paul starts something new or anything starts something new. Because even in First Corinthians, he's writing about wisdom that is being spoken in a secret in First Corinthians 2:6. It wasn't publicized, of course, until Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians, making that a good narrative divide. But as to an actual timeline, I think it's faulty to claim that when one administration ends, another begins. I think that's a little too much of a generalization there. But yeah, anyways, Roman, it made me stop and like really think about Romans 11, and I've been dwelling on it for a while. I'm almost hoping that Catherine like slows down the Roman series a lot, so that way I can have my time to really think about that and think about how I want to word that, because there's a lot going on there. And yeah, I mean, I've always been the person who will say that Paul's Evangel is like the Fight Club of the Fight Club plot twist, if I could make that comparison. 'Cause, you watch Fight Club for the first time, and it's a wonderful movie. You get like most of the way through, and then all of a sudden there's this massive plot twist, and you're like, "Whoa, this is not at all what I thought it was." And you have to like go, "Whoa, wait a minute," and then you have to stop and rewatch the movie, and then you realize, "Oh my god, everything was making sense this whole time in this totally different light." Um, and so you start. It's the same way with the Bible. You reach justification and conciliation, and then you learn about the purpose for the eons, which was headed up in Christ, and it's like, whoa, hold the phone, restart all of this. What just happened here? So you get to like restart Genesis and go back through the Bible again, and everything makes so much more sense. And you're like, oh my god, there's this plot that's been happening in the background the whole time. Martin put it very well, saying there were all these verses that all of a sudden in the Old Testament they're jumping out at you, and they weren't before, but now everything makes sense. And it's like, wait a minute, so crazy. Hey, Poopy. Yeah, I'll reread it. I'll reread it soon, hopefully. Oh, it's good to see y'all in here. Yeah, I agree. I think for me, the toughest part is really like that part of the Bible from First Corinthians 11-ish to 14-ish. Makes a lot more sense but the only way that section really makes any sense to me is by acknowledging that it is a prior administration, that it's the 8th administration, particularly the stuff at the first half of First Corinthians 12, and also First Corinthians 14. 13 makes sense, but I think 13 is kind of the key to it. It's the second half of 13 that really highlights that these gifts that they were receiving. I mean, they didn't have the whole compendium of the scriptures like we have now. They had to have certain species of languages, gifts of healing, so on and so forth, that they could work with to help understand. So yeah, I mean, just like little things like that. Yeah, I get that for sure. Also, 2 Corinthians 13. I don't think I've ever really fully understood that part of the letter. It's always been an enigma to me. I like that word, enigma. It's been confusing to me. And then there's some parts in First Timothy that are tough to apprehend for me. I'm just gonna be honest, guys. I hardly visit Philemon, which is a shame because I think Philemon's probably one of the most beautiful, but I don't visit it as much as I should. Like maybe I should one day, but you know. Anyways, yeah, it's gonna be it for me. I'll come back here in a little bit. I'll do a Romans reading here because he's gonna start Romans 6, verses 1 and 2 is what his next article will be on. So I'm really excited to dive into that. And I'm just gonna be totally honest. I lost my job yesterday, so I have some free time. might as well make use of that and start plowing through a lot of this. I've been revamping my study also on the three heavens and earths, and the 5 worlds, 5 eons, 12 administrations. I'm going to be rewriting that and reworking on it. So it'll happen. Yeah, it does. It definitely sucks. Well, actually, no. You know what? Yeah, I think I was put in an extremely good mood when I heard that they fired me. I didn't mind it. I've been subject to some ridiculous discrimination there, because I'm not a man. I mean, sorry, I'm not a woman, so they won't let me, do the evening shifts behind the bar. It was extremely discriminatory. And they essentially said that I'd be fired if I didn't. And it's really pathetic, I think. One of the worst attitudes that I've ever seen from any management system in my life. They're very vapid. They didn't have much going on behind those eyes of theirs, but honestly, I'm okay with that. I would much rather work for someone who does care. Especially the head manager there is like sleeping with some of the servers. Like it's really disgusting behavior. And I wasn't enjoying it. Me and Amaris, we were looking for any way to get away from it. And that's like surface level stuff. Like get me off camera and I'll probably spout off a lot more. Because it's man, it was disgusting. But yeah, I'm pretty happy to be out of there. At the end of the day, I'm just the kind of person who if I'm having to sell you something, I want to sell you something worthwhile. I don't want to sit there and sell you things that benefit the greedy and rich. That's what it feels like, unfortunately. But they'll learn. I mean, obviously, the consolation is the expectation, and I pity them more often than not because they don't have an expectation. So, you know. But thank you, Deborah. Yeah. So I'm thinking, there is a interesting job that I'm thinking about taking up that I wish I could be taking up immediately. I just have to wait for an email back. If not, I will at worst end up doing some DoorDash stuff here during the summer. Amaris has done a few hours the past weekend to kind of see how it is, and it pays pretty well. I mean, it pays like 20-ish dollars an hour, which I mean, that's a steal in comparison to the businesses that don't want to pay people nowadays here in town. So gotta commend DoorDash for that. Even if their practices aren't the best, at the very least they'll pay the customer. I mean, sorry, the worker. But yeah, that's the restaurant atmosphere. Yeah. Well, honestly, I've never seen. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've probably seen managers sleeping with servers before, but that was one of the first places where I'd just ever seen it just blatantly happening. Like, it's just not a good individual. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that could be a pretty solid option too. I wouldn't mind that. Be a pretty good one. What I do know, I'll be requited for it. That's for sure. It's a unique struggle that could only be brought about in this part of the generations at this time. So, thankfully, he will pay, and his is vengeance. So that is also his deal. It's crazy too because I actually do have evidence to the discriminatory practice. Like you can see it on my schedule. Like it goes from, oh, here you are working every single week. All of a sudden you're only working mornings. I had never been like written up. I'd never been faced with anything. I was never like late. They claimed that that was one of the reasons that they were dropping me. I was like, guys, I at worst there was one singular day where I was like 5 minutes late tops. Um, and when it was, I told the manager on duty. Every other week, 1, 2 minutes late at worst, and if at all. Um, and the reason I know it's nonsense is because, in contrast, some of the servers there, they're not showing up for half hour, 40 minutes. I'd watch Maurice set up most of the restaurant, and all the other servers don't have the integrity to show up on time. And I would see it all the time. And, I wouldn't say anything. I just kind of let it go. And, I'm watching it. But there were also times where I'd be home with Maurice and I'd be like, man, all these guys are probably getting the second death, man. Um, I don't know. Yeah, but a trade could be good. You guys are totally right on that front. Just would have to know, like where I would wanna go. Um, I would also not wanna be traveling too much, if that were to happen for whatever reason. Um, but I mean, other than that, I mean, I know like I have there's some ironically there are actually some people in the electricity companies that I know about that I could probably speak to. Um, maybe I will actually um, look into that. It'll be very hot out, but I could I could make that work. But thank you guys. Be a good HVAC guy. Yeah. I so honestly I was I would just have to learn, But I was talking with the maintenance guy here. He was talking about potentially getting me a spot here on the complex as a maintenance guy, which I wouldn't be discriminated against at all in that regard, which would be pretty helpful. Um, I'd just have to make sure that the crew would actually take me. Um, but yeah, Anyways, here let me get some tea or something. I will come back here maybe like 20 minutes, something like that. I'll set up the StreamYard now for Romans. And please feel free to join. I'm gonna come on in and do Romans 6. And thank you, Chris. It's everyone always says that, but it's like it's not. I'm really not. The thing is, all I've got is a memory. Like that's literally it. I've just got a memory. I can remember things. Otherwise, like I'm just there's nothing here. I'm like a blank slate, really. Keith, Comfort, our brother Keith, he asked me a question today. He was like, what's one thing you're like really looking forward to on the new Earth? And I couldn't think of a thing. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like there's the obvious, like no tears and stuff, but like what he was asking was for me to get creative with it, like get imaginative, like what's something you'd want, But I have like I'm such a simple mind. Like I'd be like, all I want is to sit down and hear all of the little plot points from start to finish. I just want to hear God's story. Like I just want to hear what He's got to say. Um, how I want to get into the depth of every single letter he puts together in the Old Testament. Like it's just like not I can't think of anything like beyond that, It's nothing that comes to mind. So yeah, but yeah, you're right. A good memory can go a long way. But unfortunately, I'm also kind of ugly, and that puts me on no-go list for a lot of these guys. Yeah, especially in customer service or sales where you're supposed to like smile all the time. Well, unfortunately, I've got depression and I have the weight of this burden of glory on my shoulders. So a lot of the time I'm like, yeah, yeah, great, you know, I just want my coffee. Yeah, okay. Let me stop here. Y'all, love y'all. Y'all are really sweet. Thank you for talking with me for a bit. I'll tell Maurice y'all said hi too. Grace and peace to you guys.